Julia Yoffe. David, we could talk about Flynn forever, but let's get to real substance, by which I mean North Korea, foreign policy substance. Tell me what the significance of this missile test was, because what I looked at it and it seemed like an old Soviet SS-18, and it's not entirely clear that the rocket was able to re-enter. You know, these things often burn out in re-entry. So given all that, and given that the SS-18 is, what is it, 35, 40 years old, why is this a big deal?
Well, the first thing, Fareed, is we didn't really see this big, almost SS-18 coming. The pace of the North Korean missile capability has been so rapid over the past year that it raises the question, why didn't we see more of this? Why wasn't there more warning? But also, are they getting help, or are they doing this entirely indigenously?
And if they're getting help, presumably it has to be from the Russians, right? There's nobody else who could do this.
Well, certainly the design of the engine that we saw there appeared to be a Russian design, came initially from a Ukrainian factory that was active when the Soviet Union was still around, hasn't made those in a long time. There are a lot of questions about how the North Koreans got that engine. And so the rocket itself went off in a relatively successful test. There are a lot of questions about whether or not the warhead burned up on re-entry. That wouldn't be strange, because the United States had a lot of warheads burn up on re-entry when we were first getting into this business in the 1950s. But what it does tell you, Fareed, is they'll figure this out. We often say this isn't rocket science. This is rocket science, but it's well-known rocket science. So I think that they'll get there. The bigger significance, though, I think, is this, Fareed. Their nuclear capability and their ability to reach the United States, it's just about there. So this game is pretty much over. And that really changes and limits the choices the president has, including whether or not he wants to try to shoot one of these down if it's approaching American territory, whether he wants to go do a preemptive strike, or whether, as I suspect, we'll just end up living with it.
Julia, at a time like this where you have this huge crisis, it seems an odd thing to have a changeover at state, to sideline or fire Rex Tillerson. And in any case, Tillerson doesn't seem to be very effective at state in order to function.
And he doesn't have a point man for East Asia, or a point woman for East Asia. So many positions are still unstaffed. He seems intent on gutting the State Department, driving out the most senior, most experienced diplomats who will take decades to replace to get people up to snuff. If we ever get another chance to restaff these positions. But I think also it's a weird time to keep knocking the Iran nuclear agreement, because if you're North Korea and you see that, okay, so one country decided to put a halt on its nuclear capabilities or developing their nuclear capabilities, to what end? To constantly have that agreement undermined, to have it rattled. If you look at Libya, what happened with Muammar Gaddafi, he gave up his nukes and then he was, essentially lynched. So if I'm North Korea, I'm not going to come to the table. I'm not going to agree to give up anything, because I have no guarantees, because this administration is completely untrustworthy.
Tillerson at state. Do you think he's out? What happens next?
I think he will be out. I think perhaps he would have been out already if it wasn't for the Flynn revelations. But after that occurred, I think Trump wanted to, in a fit of pique, say, nope, you guys are fake news here. I'm telling you, I'm with him for now. But clearly he doesn't have a functional relationship, not only with President Trump himself, but at this point, even Secretary of Defense Mattis, even National Security Advisor McMaster have been calling for his ouster. But I do think on the North Korea issue, the fact is that we can't take Trump seriously or literally at this point. He said that the North Koreans would be stopped before they had the opportunity to develop a ballistic missile that could hit the continental United States. They now have one that clearly could hit Washington, D.C. Not credible. And that's okay. He used to say that the Mexicans were going to pay for a wall. He said it every day before he won. He doesn't say that anymore. I think we should take comfort in the fact that he says stuff, but the reality is that there are now engaged diplomacy between the Chinese at a relatively high level and the North Koreans, that the South Koreans on the ground don't want a fight and are looking for a way to perhaps support this freeze for freeze that the Chinese have said, freeze of tests for the freeze for exercises with the United States. And I think
which
that
would
Trump,
be a complete reversal of Trump's rhetoric, as you say, which was unyielding denuclearization of North Korea or nothing.
if there's any president that we've seen in modern times that can do a 180 on national security, it's President Trump. And by the way, he may not have much of a choice if the Chinese, South Koreans, and North Koreans are all moving ahead without him.
And then do another 180 to start right where to end up right where he started. Right?
David Sanger, we have 30 seconds, and I just want to ask you about the move of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. For now, what we have is Trump is splitting the difference. He's going to recognize Jerusalem, but not move the embassy. Does it change anything?
Well, it won't change much on the ground, Fareed, but it could end up being another huge provocation, and one in a region that has seen a lot of those and a lot of instability. And the question is, what do you buy for making the statement other than making your base happy, if in fact it does lead to protests, attacks, or even the resumption of an intifada?
So here we have, a base-only policy that is now extended into foreign policy, where you have a piece of foreign policy that seems to have no practical effect other than a kind of symbolic reassurance to the base. Thank you all very much. Fascinating conversation. We will have to do it again soon. Next on GPS, another big thing in Washington this week. The Senate passed a tax bill. Instead of simplifying things, in many ways it complexifies the tax code. We will get global lessons on how to really simplify taxes. There is a lot for America to learn from many countries which have much simpler tax codes.